Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. Before we get into things, I just want to mention, this entire video is pretty dark, and pretty much every story covers sexual assault. So if you want to avoid that, go ahead and click off this video right now. Also, I didn't intend for this video and the last video to be back-to-back sexual assault stories. It just kind of happened that way. I'll try and do a better job in the future with splitting things up, so you're not hearing the same kind of stories back-to-back like this. And again, if stories like this are too brutal for you, I totally understand and respect it. Anyways, now that all of that's covered and out of the way, let's get into the stories. This happened about 3 years ago. I'm a 31-year-old female, by the way. So I had a coworker at the time that would always talk to me about this one guy she met on an online dating site and how much she liked him. Eventually, I let her talk me into trying the site myself. I wasn't really sure about it at first, because I've never really been on a dating site before, nor have I ever thought about it, because it just wasn't my thing. But then I said, what the heck, why not? And I went on ahead and made an account. It was OkCupid, I believe. There were a lot of men messaging me, saying things like, "Hello, beautiful," or "Hi, sexy," and all kinds of other boring things that didn't really interest me. Fast forward about 1 week later, there was this one guy that kind of stood out to me. I can't even remember what he said, but all I remember is for some reason, he really caught my attention, and I responded to him. He was a nice looking guy, and he lived in Baltimore. I lived in Atlanta, but I liked his conversation, so I didn't mind. He seemed very normal, so I thought everything would be okay. We chatted on the site for a few days, then we decided to exchange numbers. And again, he seemed really normal at first. Now, here's where things get weird. So, on the second day of talking to him on the phone, I guess he got really comfortable with me, and he started telling me some really disturbing things. He told me that one time when he was in the army, he went to a bar with a few of his friends, and he met this girl. They started talking, and then after about an hour or so, they went outside to his car, I guess to make out. And then one thing led to another, and he ended up raping her. I was in complete shock when he said that. I felt my heart just drop into my stomach. I thought I heard him wrong, so I asked him, did you just say you raped her? He laughed a little bit, and then said, "Well, yes. I bent her over and forced her. She tried to scream for help, but I covered her mouth, and I told her if she didn't shut up, I'll hurt her." He said that he could tell that she liked it too. What the fuck? Who in the world says that someone liked to be raped when they were clearly crying and trying to scream out for help? I think that this man had some kind of weird rape fetish that he really got off on or something, and all of that shit about her liking it was just his sick, twisted mind. At this point, I was feeling extremely uncomfortable and was getting a really bad vibe from this guy. After listening to him tell me that story, I knew this man was sick and I didn't want to continue talking to him. But for some reason, I did. He then started telling me that he was married before and he has a son, but that she left him for another man. And so he hid in her bushes one night with a gun, waiting for her to come home. He told me that he actually planned on killing them both that night, but she saw him hiding in her bushes and called the police on him. The fact that he hid in her bushes and said that he was going to kill them was absolutely insane to me. I have no idea why he was telling me these things, but I knew that there was no way that I was going to meet up with this guy. And the most disturbing part is, he acted as if his behavior was normal. But the last straw was when he tried to get me to move to Thailand with him. He told me that he had some kind of job offer there, and he wanted us to get married and move there. I've only been talking to this man for a few days. We haven't even met in person, but he's talking about marriage and moving in together? What the fuck? I told him no way, and I made some excuse about not wanting to move away from my family and friends here in Atlanta. He got really upset and he said that I should stop being a baby and just move away with him. He then said, "I mean, come on. You're a big girl, right? I think it's time for you to start making your own decisions and move away from your family and be with me." There was seriously something wrong with this guy. He then goes on to say that he doesn't allow his woman to work. He wants me to stay home at all times until he gives me permission to leave the house. He had these weird sexual fantasies about him breaking in the house and tying me up and sharing me with 3 of his friends. He demanded that I do this with him whether I liked it or not. He also said that I can only talk to my friends or family with his permission. This man was a complete psycho. I told him that he's making me very uncomfortable and that there's no way I'll be getting involved with him whatsoever. I told him to lose my number and to never call me back again. He got very upset and started screaming at me, telling me that I was stupid for ruining everything, and that all women are the same, and that he was going to marry me and give me a great life. He called me a bitch and said a bunch of other crazy shit that I can't really remember. I immediately hung up the phone on him and blocked him. I also deleted my OkCupid account. Oh, and I forgot to mention that he tried to get me to do sexual things with him on Skype, and also send him videos and nudes. And every time that I told him no, he would get really upset, then try to pressure me to do what he really wanted me to do. What a creep he was. I tried to Google him and see if I could find any info on him, like mugshots or anything else about this creep. But unfortunately, I got nothing. He tried to call me from a different number a few times after that, and he messaged me on Facebook, but I just ignored and blocked him, and I never heard from him again after that. I know this story wasn't really that scary, but I hope my story can really help someone out there realize that there are some really sick and disturbed people on these dating sites. Please be careful on those sites. I just thank God that all the red flags were revealed to me early on, and that stopped me from meeting up with them. I can't help but wonder what this man would have possibly done to me if he did. He probably would have kidnapped and raped me, or held me hostage somewhere. He seemed like the type that would do such a thing. He definitely gave me rapist vibes. I kind of even feel like he might have been part of that sex trafficking stuff too. That's why I was so anxious to get me to leave my family and go away with them. I don't really know though. It's a scary thought, but I'm really glad I never had to find out. To preface this story, I'd like to start off by saying that where I'm from, it's not unusual to use Tinder for other things besides hooking up. Some people use it to make friends. And back in 2020, when I was 22 years old, I was on the app for that exact reason. I have always been an extremely shy person, and meeting people in real life and befriending them is a huge struggle for me. So, since I was feeling quite lonely, in part because the pandemic left me isolated from the few friends I had, I decided to go on Tinder. Maybe if I was lucky, I would befriend 1 or 2 cool people. For the record, my bio specifically stated that I was only interested in making friends, and I actually got to talking with a few people that I really got along with. However, one guy stood out. He was kind, funny, liked a lot of the same things I did, etc. After a week or so of talking, I felt like I could trust him, and I gave him my number. We started video chatting somewhat regularly, as well as texting. Just nice, friendly, innocent stuff like that. I never would have guessed things would have taken the turn they did. After around a month, we decided to meet. Big mistake. I agreed to meet him at a shopping center, thinking that if we were in public like that, I'd be safe no matter what. I'm a very short, petite female, and I've always been described with adjectives such as adorable or cute. So it's safe to assume that I'm quite defenseless looking. Well, it seems like he picked up on that. As soon as I met him, I realized he was at least 40 centimeters taller than me. He towered over me, and I think he immediately clocked me as someone who'd be an easy target. And boy, was he right. We sat down and I'm trying to make casual, friendly conversation, mostly about the interest that we had already established we both shared. However, he wasn't engaging. He interrupted me to ask,
"Can I hold your hand?"
I was so caught off guard. I mean, it's not really common to hold hands in a non-romantic setting like that. So I immediately shook my head, politely explaining that I wasn't comfortable with that. He didn't like that. He got up, gesturing and pacing in front of me, and complaining that he was 19 and was a virgin, and that women never gave him a chance, and that I won't so much as let him touch my hand. Real incel stuff right here. Red flags all over. I was starting to get extremely nervous, recoiling in my seat, wondering if he was unhinged enough to actually do something inappropriate in such a public setting. Well, turns out he was. I was just staring up at him, unsure of what to say. Obviously, I wanted to point out that women aren't the root of his issue, his personality was. But I was surely not going to piss the guy off and make him even angrier. So I chose to just not say anything. I'm assuming he realized his little outburst wasn't increasing his odds of getting laid. So he sat back down next to me, really close to me too, like our legs were touching. I scooted away, and before I could get a comfortable distance between us, he grabbed my hand, actually kind of hurting me, and kept me from moving further away. With his free hand, he pulled his cell phone from his pocket, announcing that he was going to show me his favorite porn. I yanked my hand away and then said, "Please don't," seriously debating getting the fuck out of this situation right about then. The problem was that I was within walking distance of my house, close enough that he could easily follow me through a path that was fairly desolate, and I wasn't going to take that risk. He immediately dismissed me, saying I was going to enjoy it, and letting go of my hand. He looked up the name of what he wanted to show me. Nothing could have prepared me for the following series of events. He proceeded to show me a clip of hentai, the cartoon kind of porn where a lady was being held hostage and repeatedly sexually assaulted by extremely deformed, ugly creatures. She was yelling "stop," screaming in pain, and he seemed to be extremely proud of what he was showing me. I must have finally snapped out of my frozen shock because I raised my voice and I told him to turn it off. I explained that it was extremely inappropriate to show a near stranger these things, especially in public. I also said the fact that this clip nearly showed a sexual assault scenario, it made me sick, and I didn't want to watch it. That's when he really lost it. He got up yet again, this time yelling at me, telling me that I'm a woman. My job is to please men like him, and if he wants to, I kid you not, he can rape me. And that's his choice. He wasn't joking. He was dead serious. He added that I should be happy that someone like him finds me attractive enough to want to kidnap me and do that to me so badly. Oh hell no. Nope. After a couple of seconds of absolutely stunned silence, I got up and started walking towards a bookstore, giving some excuse about how there was a new book release and I wanted to go check it out. He followed me, but after a couple of minutes of me mindlessly browsing the store, frantically thinking about how I was going to get out of this situation, he got bored, and he said he'd take advantage of this time to use the bathroom, which was right across from the store. Bingo. The second he disappeared into the restroom, I booked it. I ran for my life like I never have before. Usually I take about 20 minutes to get home from the shopping center, but this time I made it home in a lot less time. I arrived home sobbing, sweating, and immediately locked my door and hid in my room. After I had calmed down, a terrifying reality sunk in. During a couple of our video chats, I'd walked to the bus stop where I'd caught the bus to go to the university in the morning, which meant that he had definitely seen my surroundings and he knew my schedule. I wouldn't be that hard to find if he really wanted to. I obviously blocked him on everything immediately, and I told family and my friend about it so they'd know, providing them with his name and a picture. But that paranoia and fear that he'd find me, especially on one of those early mornings when I walked to the empty bus stop by myself before the sun had even risen, when I'd have no one to help me if he even did anything, didn't go away for a very long time. Thankfully, I never saw or heard from him again. I know this story isn't as scary as many of the others you read, but my country is extremely safe, You definitely don't expect these situations to happen until they do. I've never felt so small, helpless, and scared for my safety in my entire life. So, to the creepy incel who doesn't see a problem with kidnapping and sexually assaulting women, I hope you end up in jail before you ever get the chance to seriously hurt another human being in your life. You disgusting sexist fuck. My name's Emmalie, and I'd like to give a little disclaimer before I start. I know a lot of the decisions I made in this story were definitely not the smartest. I kick myself now for not knowing better, but I just remind myself I was naive and trusting and still a teenager. I apologize if some of this sounds rambly or seems like I can't remember it fully. My memory is shot due to the trauma. So some backstory. This happened in the fall of 2020. My boyfriend had broken up with me right out of the blue, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I was angry and upset at him and felt so empty and lonely. I decided, as any young person does, to go to Tinder. This one guy stood out in particular. Let's call him Todd. Todd was an awkward, dorky guy who seemed pretty aloof and cute. He didn't ever pressure me to do anything, and he seemed super sweet, so I got to know him a little because he seemed harmless. We decided to hang out at his house for our first date. He was quite a bit older than me. I was 19 at the time, and he was about 26. He lived with his mother, so he snuck me upstairs into his room. I slept over at his house the first night I was there, and I slept with him immediately. Flash forward after a few times that I slept over at his house. It was around Halloween, and we were watching one of my favorite movies. I had quite a bit to drink, and because of the medication I'm on, I get really drunk really fast, so I was basically blacked out at this point. I was trying to fall asleep, and I told Todd how tired I was, but he kept trying to get me to do things and to get him off. I just kept mumbling I would do it in the morning, and as I was drifting out of consciousness, he took advantage of me. I tried to roll away because I was so tired and drunk. I felt like I couldn't say anything or make him move. It was really upsetting, and I cried after he turned off the lights about an hour later. The next morning he took me home, and it took me about a day or two to realize what had happened to me. The same thing happened in 2019, so it all hit me really hard. I was ignoring him and not returning his texts, and he was begging to meet up with me. I don't think he understood what he did fully, and I explained it to him, that he had assaulted me and I didn't want to talk to him anymore. He asked to take a drive with me so we could talk. I don't know why, but I agreed. When I got into his car, it was awkward. He tried kissing me, but I wouldn't let him. He then drove and drove, and I had no idea where we were going. We lived in different towns, and I wasn't really familiar with the town he was from. He was silent and gripping the steering wheel. I was terrified. I had dated guys before with anger issues, and I couldn't help but tense up and move away from him in anticipation. After what felt like forever, he eventually parked in the back of the school at a football field. I was laying back in my seat looking at the stars through the sunroof while he sat there. I was shaking the whole time, just dreading him trying to touch me again. His knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, and I remember texting my best friend and telling him I didn't feel safe and to please come pick me up. At that moment, I thought he was going to attack me. I was afraid for my life. I was in an empty parking lot in the dark with a man who I hardly knew who had already hurt me once. I started crying and hyperventilating, and he tried to calm me down. He tried to hug me and tell me I was safe. I told him not to touch me and to take me home. At first he wouldn't, and he was demanding we talk it out. Eventually he gave in and sped back to my house. I ran out of that car and never looked back. Later on, I blocked him on everything, but I swear, I really thought in that moment that I was going to die. The silence, the anger I could feel radiating off of him, the empty parking lot. It all just seemed like a textbook true crime story. He's tried to contact me since, but I've blocked every attempt. At one point, I had made myself an OnlyFans and had gotten a DM request for just a phone call. And since it's anonymous, I agreed. That is, until he told me his name. It was Todd, and he had been watching me and keeping tabs on me since I dropped him. Mind you, this was about 6 to 7 months after we last spoke, and although I could really use the money, I couldn't bear going back and talking to him. I blocked him again and tried to forget he even existed. Now I know this may not be the scariest story, as nothing really happened, and it may have all just been my anxiety at the end of the day, but it's one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me, and I had to share my story. Thank you for listening.